First, Vice President Harris and Governor Tim Walz are hitting the road in the battleground state of Georgia for a second day. Meanwhile, former President Trump is getting ready to campaign in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. It comes as a new poll finds Harris has closed the gap with Trump in the Sun Belt swing states. ABC News White House correspondent Mary Alice Parks joins me now, along with ABC News senior reporter Catherine Faulders for more. Mary Alice, who is the Harris-Walz campaign trying to reach with this bus tour?
Yeah, Diane, part of what's so interesting is that they didn't just go to Georgia. They went to a part of the state where we often don't see Democrats campaign. The last few cycles, Democrats have made huge inroads in those suburbs right around Atlanta. We saw a lot of those moderate women in that area, younger professionals sort of leave the Republican Party in those crucial sort of suburbs. I'm thinking like Fulton County right outside Atlanta. But this bus tour, they're targeting the southern part of the state. They're going after rural voters. They're really leaning into Walz's own background, his own biography as someone who grew up in small-town rural America in Nebraska and Minnesota. Obviously also talking to black voters. They feel like they're seeing a lot of movement in their direction in Georgia. Really interesting. Not only have the polls tightened, but overnight we saw that Fox News poll actually showing Harris ahead of Trump in Georgia. They're boasting of how they've had tens of thousands of new volunteers in the state. So really Democrats making a big play in these last few months, Diane.
Catherine, we also have some new reporting about Vice President Harris facing criticism during her run for office in 2003. What's the latest on that?
Yeah, so let's travel back, I guess, 20 years ago. And this is when Harris was running for office, her first time running for office as a San Francisco DA. Now, back then, she was facing criticism about inflating her prosecutorial record. She was confronted about this during a debate with her opponent, who said, how many cases have you prosecuted? She said 50. Her opponent said, well, actually, the campaign's been saying 100. And she seemed to acknowledge that criticism, but also moved on from it and pivoted during that debate. But all in all, what this shows, at least relating it to now, is that she isn't obviously making these claims now. This was during her first run for office, but her campaign obviously is running heavily on her prosecutorial record. It also shows potentially how she might act in the upcoming debate, when she was confronted with this by her opponent. She essentially pivoted and moved on to something else. It gives a little bit of insight into that and how she reacted when confronted by something that wasn't accurate at the time.
Now, Mary Alice, what message is the Trump campaign taking to the Rust Belt, and how critical is that region for him right now?
Look, I think it's critical for Democrats to hold when you look at the electoral map. And what's going to be really interesting is if Republicans are able to sort of win over any of those states. I mean, for a long time, Democrats talked about it as the blue wall, right? Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania really is sort of the must-win state for either campaign. I think that Pennsylvania might decide this whole race. But what's so interesting is that Trump remembers in 2016 when he was able to put a crack in that blue wall, especially in Michigan. And so we're seeing them really double down in that area. They think they have a powerful story to tell when it comes to their economic message. Trump obviously pitching tariffs that he believes would help sort of onshore jobs, bring manufacturing back to the country if essentially there's a tax put on companies that are bringing in goods from overseas. The Harris team arguing that tariffs are often sort of a price and a tax that companies pass on to consumers. They can actually lead to prices they can lead to inflation. They can lead to price growth. So an interesting sort of economic sort of message and battle over the message there. But I don't think that that this is the end of the story. I mean, I think we're going to see both campaigns zero in on that part of the country because of, when you look at the electoral map, it could decide the whole race. And of course, because of the sort of background, the biography again of these candidates. We're seeing Walz lean into his Minnesota roots in the Midwest, and we're seeing J.D. Vance lean into the fact that he grew up in the Rust Belt, and talking, of course, about growing up in small-town Ohio.
And Catherine, the Army released a new statement about the Trump visit to Arlington National Cemetery, noting that they consider this matter closed because they say the staffer who attempted to enforce policies has decided not to press charges. So what's the latest on that?
Right, you see that statement there saying the incident was reported to the police department. The employee decided not to press charges, and the Army, of course, says that because of that, they consider this matter closed. look, this comes obviously after there was an incident report filed, according to Arlington National Cemetery. This was because there was filming in an area of that cemetery called Section 60 where recent veterans are buried, and there was an incident reported, a physical and verbal altercation, according to at least a source who told that to NPR. The Trump campaign has denied there was any physical altercation, but in any event, the staffer has said, who was allegedly involved in this incident, that they won't push charges. The Army says that this incident is closed, but of course the storyline is continuing as family members of some of those who are buried there continue to speak out.
All right, Mary Alice Parks, Catherine Falders, thank you.